Well, hello. Congratulations, Lars and Lassies. What am I thinking about?
Bar.
You did it! The Stop Killing Game initiative smashed the 1 million signature mark, the requirement that was needed to get it through, and that is amazing. And not just that, it is packing a lot more for good measures. A good padding, that is, in case some signatures were to be invalid. I do know of some people who were joking about using the old age martial art technique of VPN. Please don't do that. Now, I said in my last video, for the last few of you who might be a little bit on the fence of whether or not you're going to be signing this, that consumer rights advocacy is super important. And if you've ever needed a reason why that is so valid as an approach, just this one step, this grassroots bare-bone minimum preventative measures that would get the European Commission involved has got some already shaking in their boots. I personally find it rather sad that some will have that as the initial reaction, but I guess it's the way to go with this, because today we aren't looking at supposed industry plants. That's for other channels to deal with, but we will be looking at some who channel the same, dare I say, energy. Enter our first adversary, Video Game Europe, who have stepped forth and spoken against this initiative. Now, I spent a good 30 to almost 40 minutes going through the portfolio on LinkedIn, because that's what you do, so to learn a little bit about the company, and I have some concern, but it's not all bad. I'm saying this because I search for nuance as always, right? Cynicism is easy, I swear. I will be the cynic in certain parts of this video, but I can also kind of understand why a company like this exists. The first thing that caught my attention was the manifesto, where one of the focal points was bringing more girls into STEM, which could feed the video game industry with more women in certain positions and help them achieve certain goals. Which is not a bad thing, okay? Hearing the people themselves talk about it was kind of inspiring.
So we've just finished an event here in Brussels combining a number of Video Games Europe's initiatives and partnerships. One with the Game Changers Coalition, which is a UNICEF program, helping inspire and train adolescent girls across the world, using video games as a platform to learn ICT skills and many others.
With this project, it clearly shows that gaming can be sort of a gateway for girls into STEM studies and professions.
After Game Changer, I've got so many skills, and especially the soft skills were the most impactful for me. I started to understand that I can make mistakes, and that's totally normal. I also started to overcome my shyness, introvertness.
Video games can go beyond entertainment and can be an educational tool if teachers are involved in the entire process, and also it can be a way in which children, girls and boys can be empowered to tell their own stories through developing video games.
With video games, you can learn 21st century skills, you can learn how to work well together, and especially you can learn how to fail. Because when you fail in a game, it's not game over, it's just try again. And I saw students getting enthusiastic to learn more about themselves, to learn more about the lessons, and to learn more about their future.
With especially the last part there, because I've told some of you this before, I have a job as a substitute teacher, at least part-time job, let's be completely clean here, so that occasionally I would cover from some of my more qualified peers. But I'll tell you this, I get a lot more attention than those peers because, let's say that I'm covering for the history teacher, I will bring up such things as my trusty game Assassin's Creed Origins. Yes, a Ubisoft product, wherein through the discovery mode I will actually show them parts of like the ancient era of one of the greatest empires that's ever existed. And this interactivity is super important because in an age and time where kinders can barely concentrate on writing their own name on a piece of paper, interactivity becomes a viable method for actually teaching them. So I guess that there is a place for this type of things. And there is of course an entire discussion about how this should be implemented, but that's not what we're here for. The thing that concerns me is the people with whom Video Game Europes are partnered with. Because here comes the cynic in me, the women who inevitably end up working in these fields and let's say working for partners such as Activision Blizzard have ended up suing for sexual harassment, had their breast milk stolen, and some even wind up dead. Yeah, remember that? And how about, I don't know, Riot Games? They made Arcane, didn't they? It was mostly the French studio Fortiche, but it was all about female empowerment. But they too had a bit of an oopsie not too long ago. For somebody who actually cares about women being in STEM, because my family, my siblings, my mom have benefited for initiatives such as these, I'm not outright going to call this a publicity stunt in the way that, you know, from a past video about Bezos and all of those ladies that actually went to space.
Right? It's very true. Tabitha, I love you putting them on the spot there. Chloe and Chris, are you guys going up?
Keeping up with the Kardashians in space. We're waiting for it. That's the all next all lady launch.
We are so cooked. I get very salty when a company proposes something that doesn't really fit with the people who are associated with it. Like some will say that let's chuck it out to the past, right? Those things have been settled in courts and it's likely changed since that. Can't you be like everybody else and be affected by, I don't know, recency bias? Oh, should I say? In the likes of who? Roblox, who is also a partner to Video Game Europe, and their sins, you know, are many. And they're even directly tied with the opposition to SKG. Let's run through some of these. The argument made here is that requiring games to run on private servers would endanger players. I quote, "The absence of effective moderation systems will create a less safe environment for consumers and may foster the proliferation of undesirable content while simultaneously frustrating the ability of the EU digital service coordinators to act against such content." To which I say, you know what? That's valid. That is valid concern. Definitely. That is, of course, if the aforementioned Roblox doesn't already have such issues running rampant while being online. And you know what the most frustrating part about this is? When Roblox was confronted with such things just a couple of months ago, when they were called out, do you know what they said? It was basically, yeah, we know that it's a problem, but we can't do anything about this, lest the government is involved, and it has to be on all platforms. Like, yeah. See, that's basically just saying a big FU to SKG. Again, this needs to be repeated, that there isn't an established form in which the game should be kept. When the statement is a reasonable functional state, it could come in many forms. It is not set in stone just yet. So for all we know, there are some people who would be satisfied just being able to run the game locally with their friends. No, that's too dangerous. Instead, we want you to support this one company who demands that your taxes are funding Roblox Diddy. And it is very stupid. And here I'm going to be borrowing the line from the anti-piracy pirate himself and say that
I think this is ass.
Because in light of what I just presented from the associated parties, having your biggest concern being cheating on private servers is kind of dumb and very baffling. But let's continue, because I think that's become very apparent for me in recent days, whether we're talking about politics, social media, whatever it might be, video games, is that very much like how correlation isn't equal causation, association might not mean that a company's board members are a bunch of blood-sucking ghouls who are hell-bent on ruining every single thing that they come across. Oh yeah, I should be showing you the members of the board. Let me click here just a little bit. So we have the chairwoman here, we have a Khalid Adadi from Roblox, Kenan Pence from Epic Games, Electronic Arts come with Karen Hopkins, Ian from Oh, what is this? Karen Hopkins.
Really makes you think.
Well, if it isn't our favorite 2019 soundbite.
Do you consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature of your games? Kerry?
Well, first, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was
whatever term you wish to apply to them. Do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics.
Yes, she who brought out that surprise mechanics, just like how the little Kinder buy the eggs and may or may not get the toy from it. That Kinder as a company can remotely wipe away as they see fit from your kid toy box. Ha ha ha. I'm sorry, that was very dumb. But having her and some others in there,
Yeah, boy.
Being the people who are going to be discussing digital fairness, it's very questionable. Like, it's Europe that we're talking about here. We can enact a bunch of good things, but when some of these board members are involved, they are going to do the same thing as they did with the PG rating, just slapping it there and still say that, well, you know, gambling isn't gambling, as long as your kid may get something out of it, and still use the parents' card, because, you know, mommy and daddy had the supervision. They are going to have digital fairness discussed by the likes of Cinnamon Rogers over here. And I'm not kidding, that is a real name. I just wanted to add it in there because it was funny. But to focus on something a little bit more serious here, another point that they seem to be very much stuck up on is just how they can't help themselves from having literal planned obsolescence right then and there, and they play it as how beneficial it is for companies. Like, this has been the statement on Stop Killing Games. And it read as such, the first line here: "We appreciate the passion of our community. However, the decisions to discontinue online service is multifaceted and never taken lightly, and must be an option for companies when an online experience is no longer commercially viable." Which I don't think that anybody had disagreed with at all. That is part of the statement itself, that we of course do understand that things need an end of life cycle, and that when it comes to online only experiences, the developers themselves need to have their own pipeline and dictate how they are going to be releasing that to the people who actually bought them. And oh no, they disagree on the part of actually having an end of life cycle and how to deal with that. Because the next line reads: "We understand that it can be disappointing for players, but when it does happen, the industry ensures that the players are given fair notice of the prospective changes in a compliance with local consumer protection laws." Which is not true. One of the big examples that we've all heard of has been that of The Crew, a game that I played myself and was taken away from my library within, what, 3 months notice.
So that was a fucking lie.
Like, we all have subscription services. The program that I'm going to be using to edit this very video makes use of one. It is sad that I can no longer buy just the full product and have it standing there, but that's the unfortunate part of capitalism. Every single thing needs to maximize the revenue. But I make use of that, and I know whenever, every single year, that my subscription is going to be renewed. But in the terms of such things as my cellular device here, a OnePlus Nord 2T, fucking name, I know when it is that the OS is no longer going to be supported, that is going to come, that it will be announced within a very good span of time. Think of how it was when Microsoft announced the end of support to Windows 7, right? Was it like a year before, something of the sort? Or just a better example that I actually brought in a past video with regards to how it is that Denmark is trying to move away from making use of the 365 suite of program that Microsoft has to offer before they have to renew a new license, right? They're moving towards the use of the likes of LibreOffice and such, because Microsoft has announced that they no longer will be supporting the security of the 365 apps in 2028. That's 3 years from now. So like, if we're looking at it through those lenses, a 3 months notice will basically be breaking the law. The last one here is of course this part that we talked about before, right? The private servers are not always a viable alternative options for players, as the protections we put in place to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content will not exist and will leave right holders liable. And we've already talked about that part. But a part that I may not have mentioned is that, yes, there is a degree of uncertainty when it comes to unsupported content that comes with the product. I don't think that anybody is assuming that you are going to be held liable for having given people a product that is no longer supported and have them tinkering to that and them just coming after you for having done something illegal. There might be ways of adding something to the EULA, such as how it is that once support ends, the company is no longer responsible for any and all issues that arise from a user continuing to operate the game. And that is of course because it is in a discontinued and unsupported state, thus absolving the company from any liability. as they should. I've brought the example of mothers in the past, an example of bad face actors that you might remember, where there were some who were adamant that Larian Studios was not making their mods compatible with the game as they just could not update along with them. You cannot go after a product that you are tinkering with while it's no longer being supported and be like, no, the company should be doing this and that, like we deserve. No, you've got what you wanted and you have to deal with it. That being said, not allowing people to keep their product under the guise of wanting to protect them sounds very weird, and dare I even say bad, because it's one of those like we must protect you from yourself kind of statement, and it's in its worst interpretation, of course, and it's just stupid. And the last line here is, in addition, many titles are designed from the ground up to be online only. In effect, this proposal will curtail developers' choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. No shit. This one is once again on a per game basis. I made use of the Helldivers Contra Call of Duty example last time that I explained this. Helldivers, which requires online connectivity all the time, I would argue that the infrastructure, as just the layman that I am, is not part of what we need. In other words, when we're talking about such things as the progression mechanics, right, which is often based around monetary incentives, right, monetization services, the cloud saving systems, the online features, such things as voice chat, the matchmaking. The vast majority of people don't need that. And of course, there's all the whole of the things with microtransactions. And again, I'm not gonna say that this is going to be pleasant for everybody. Not for dev number 42069 who had the great plan of making a live service that is a gacha-like that was going to be living off of simply selling skins. And even if you want to put the blame on gamers that, yeah, they weren't just regulated to think this way, they were actually adamant that fostering this type of behavior and supporting this economy. I personally think that restricting game development to such a degree that it does not rely simply on this type of monetary incentive, right? It's like a net positive. And you can disagree with me, and of course that is totally fine. But what you cannot argue with is that this will affect existing games, because again, the initiative is not retroactive. So whatever it is that the current Warframe, Helldivers, you name them, the ones that are successful that a lot of people like, it's not going to affect them. And again, a hilarious thing about this is that if you are a dev or even a content creator, I'm gonna include myself in here because I've had a chance to experience this, they will often have a local test for games. Which just means that, yeah, this pipeline is possible. You can have these things done. Now, they end this entire thing by saying that we welcome the opportunity to discuss our position with policymakers and those who have led the European Citizens Initiative in the coming months. Now, this will not involve the likes of Ross, as far as I know, he's not actually like straight up representing this. He is representing it in the form that he is promoting the initiative, right? But he won't be the one who is actually carrying the discussions here, because that will be somebody in the European group that is likely going to be, what's the term here? Non-profit. I was thinking about non-fungible tokens, because we talked about microtransactions. My brain is weird. Now, my last point is going to be this, okay? I've been hating a bit on these companies, which rightfully deserve the hate, but like, and the sad thing is that there are actually successes that they could have been talking with, right? Newfound successes and others that are well established that they actually have collaborated with in the past. Again, I did spend some time going to that LinkedIn account and watched even the concerts that featured music from different studios. There were the likes of the Witcher music, right? So why not have the input of the likes of CD Projekt, who are famously known for collaborating with their fans on improving their game, Cyberpunk 2077, and the aforementioned Larian Studios, who have the best community. If you actually do care, don't just be a mouthpiece for the many supporters that are investing money in your endeavors. You still get tax incentives from European citizens to sponsor your work. I'm talking to Video Game Europe here. So if you want to actually participate in this in good faith, have the discussions with the right people.